The fumes intertwined, the deep red speckles weaving within the smooth green vapors as they fell into my lungs, my brain already throbbing from total sensory overload. My focus faded and separated into two entirely different scenes, as if looking through a red-green set of 3D glasses. The blurs began to take form, and out of the mist, stood Dimitri and Sally, the blackness unfolding behind them. "You have just done what no other man has done before, attempted to control the two herbal superpowers of Mother Earth," they said in unison, "and by now must realize just how dangerous your trip will be." My trip? Where am I going? Not even the most experienced psychonauts know exactly where their adventure may lead them, and but a few return alive. The lands you will encounter are ones of purity and the utmost secrecy, for they exist only within you. Whatever shape that manages to take form behind us shall be your path. Take care in where you place your next foot, for this world is one of surprises, some of which are hardly as they seem. With that the two apparitions vanished, and I stared into the darkness in front of me. A white cannon light streamed across the night sky to my right, and a pack of rainbow butterflies followed the stream of photons with unimagined speed. A whoosh of white doves whistled over my head, bowing down over the streets before sailing behind a gray skyscraper. I was in a bustling city of buildings, cars and streets, with the amount of activity ecstatic. People were all flocking towards the hill where the birds went and the lights were coming from, all content to smile and wave at each other, all perfectly happy with the chill in the air and the stranger blocking the footpath. I stepped out of the road to let the people by, with a few encouraging pats on the back to help me get to where I was heading. I had just made it to the shops on the edge of the footpath when I bumped into the action hero himself, James Bond. A purple suit and an off-yellow Rolex on his wrist, his perfect voice sang out in a goodbye to the shop owner behind him, a Calvin Klein store, where he must have purchased such a fine suit. Even by the luster of the night sky the shop looked vibrant, its pink walls coated in brown specks of a crumbly material, soft on the eye but hard to the touch. I swiveled the rock in my hand, admiring its sensation of power and significance before the bell of the shop next door rang, and out stepped one of the weirdest dressed women I'd ever seen. She was coated from head to toe in every colored garment in the land, beaming with a grin that melted my heart right there. Both of our eyes met, and she walked up to me, talking all the way. "Hello. How are you? Don't you just love my clothes? Where are you heading tonight?" "To the nightclub, no doubt." "Silly me. Enjoying your trip in phenethylamine, I imagine. Won't you be my guest at the bar tonight, young man?" Which raises the question, have we been properly introduced yet? There I go again, yakking my mouth off to strangers again. Aren't I just a doof? I was swept off my feet and into a grey Audi TT parked outside, and only managed to catch the name Visionary Cacti Phenethylamine on her shop front before whizzing off the street towards the hill. Every exotic car brand imaginable was displayed for all those eyes quick enough to catch them zoom past, but our Audi had just enough zip to even their speed: blue Armanis, red Ferraris, green Mitsubishis, white Rolls Royces. The towering cylindrical buildings flew by, and I was inspired to question the lady as to its odd texture. It seemed it was the pride of the land, and that I may come across the material tonight without much trouble. I glanced up at the hill, and we cruised higher towards the light and sounds. By now, the whole land was thumping with the beat resonating from the nightclub above us. I soon discovered my exuberant host was Miss Kelly, and that I would be meeting Adam at the club tonight, the mayor of the city we were now leaving behind us. I was the first white eye this land had ever had, and I must meet the mayor before I lose my sense of individuality, whatever that meant. The doors almost fell off their hinges due to the overpowering thump of 1,000 speakers, each almost as tall as myself. It seemed a guest DJ had been hired in advance to accommodate the crowd gathering at the entrance. Bodyguards were non-existent in this society, and all those who were ready to enter passed straight along the empty line and into the blinding light that flowed from the doorway. Torsten Weirdman read the flyer stuck to the door, but his talent was far from it. The rest of the night was a blur from then on, and I can only remember the trance-like state I entered as I connected with the group around me. We all formed a hole on the dance floor, and it left me deep in thought as to how much Earth would benefit from these mysterious glowing pills that were being handed around. Finally, after a long night of rapid pulse beats and frequent menthol breaks, I was approached by Miss Kelly once again and led up to the main podium, and was stood beside Torsten in the empty space that was soon to be filled. Miss Kelly hushed the attentive group as Adam stepped up to microphone, cleared his throat, and began to speak. "Hello, and welcome again to this most special of nights, one which I have a few highly regarded guests in attendance. Thanks to Miss Kelly, we have arranged for Phenethylaminia's proudest export, Torsten Weirdman, to play live for us all. But the real reason for such a gathering is so that I can announce the arrival of the land's most minuscule pupil guest, the honorary. Adam froze. His face went white with horror, before falling face first through the podium and into the crowd below. Blood sprayed out the gap in the back of his head as the knife wriggled free, and its owner recoiled its blade to his lips. His naked body was translucent and slimy, and his spindly figure was poised ready to attack again. Our eyes met, and I could see his flaring up, his deep and wretched soul in an angry fear at my innocence and individuality. The room became a blur as Ms. Kelly forced myself into the throng of silence below, screaming out, "Katie! Take the boy to Lucy! And have him perform the candy flip." I heard Ms. Kelly's blood-curdling scream as I landed flat on my back on the hard corkboard floor below, my back aching with blunt pain from the landing. I was blacking out fast, and was suddenly swept up and was somehow flying towards the roof above me. I caught sight of the evil monster as he withdrew his knife from Torsten's throat, eyeing me on as if to judge my inner being. With that, I was sent crashing through the ceiling, rocketing out of view, away from the glowing lights filtering out of the gap in the roof. I came to as the bottles of fire sprayed past us, streams of flaming liquid pursuing our every twist and turn. Molotov cocktails were rising from every angle from the misty land below, the scorch of flames burning the air beside our heads. The fog was torching in places, its flames sizzling before being enveloped by the air above it. The area smelt of petrol fumes, and was generally creepy. Audible yells and shallow splashes could be heard below. "Where are we, Katie?" "Keep quiet for now. I will tell you later. Let me dodge these Molotovs for now." After a few minutes the mist cleared, and the banks of a vast sea rose up to meet a land of sunny fields, winding creeks and vast forests that encompassed all of nature's beauty. We slowly descended into a ring of stones beside a creek that ran deep into the land, and landed comfortably, although weary from our journey. As I spun around to see who had taken me all this way, I saw the sun rising gently behind this mammoth figure of plastic piping and metallic armor. Katie was a woman warrior with serious technological know-how, a jetpack flaring at her back and her suit flashing with readouts and beeping microchips. She glistened in the sun, and I could not speak, but she went first. "I can imagine you have a lot of questions that are begging to be answered, but I can't stay here and idly chat. I shall get started straight away. You may be wondering who, or what, that thing was back in the nightclub. That monster is Chris, Adam's brother. His jealousy of Adam's lucrative control of the nightclub market has long been his uphill struggle, and cannot stand being swept aside for Adam's popularity and respect. His rage has finally driven him to commit murder upon his own brother, as well as Ms. Kelly and Torsten Weirdman. His attack is not entirely coincidental though, he obviously picked the same night that you, the White Eye, decided to attend the festivities. We had to keep you as far away from Chris as possible, for you are now the only person alive who can face up to him. Adam could, but he could not guard his back forever." "How did you know I was coming?" I said, full of fear of this strange and evil presence in the land I just left behind. On his way to this land, Dimitri spread news of the arrival of the individual to Adam and others. I am not sure of where Sally went to, which is why I must return back soon. I shall tell you of his business later, but you wish to know where we have just been. We've just flown over the Sea of Lost Spirits, the only thing that separates the unity between the two great lands. Its inhabitants are alcoholics, aggressive souls that were banished long ago due to their disruptive and uncivilized nature. Their leader is Jack Daniels, a crazed drunk who rules the foul sea, as well as his doomed followers. The sea is made of pure alcohol, and is covered with a thin mist of alcohol fumes, ones which do not take to flames very well. The desperation of the alcoholics must have been at a height, or their intoxication mind-blowing, for not often do they risk naked flames on the sea itself. We were lucky that my jetpack flames did not engulf the alcohol fumes and end our flight, but it is the only way for us to cross between the two lands. Why did we not just sail across, just as those back there do? Not since the olden days has a person from either land tried to cross the sea. All the boats that set sail from the shore return covered in bloody limbs, alongside newly possessed bodies ready to exact revenge on the people of the land. But now to the present, and the future, you are in Triptominia, and have been sent here to follow Dimitri's earlier lead. It is the safest place separate from Phenethylamina, as Chris will most likely try to follow you here. You must follow this creek until you go deep into the forest, and within there you will find Lucy, her chairman MAOI, and hopefully Dimitri. Do not stop to smell the flowers or pet the animals, for even though they are of much wonder and amazement, time is easily lost in this area of the world. I shall leave now to locate Sally, and bring her back to this land, and hopefully we will cross paths before too much trouble arises. Goodbye, and good luck." And with that, Katie let out a loud boom, and her jetpack rocketed her into the gray mist that lay behind her. I stood there, chilled by the sight of the sea of lost spirits, but the land in front of me canceled every bad feeling I'd experienced that previous night. As I paced along the worn path, I quickly approached the forest, but not before absorbing the morning rays, and all the glory they held. I could make out activity by the edge of the forest, and no stranger sight had I beheld in both lands, but tan babies in hula flower chains dancing around carved wooden roses. The preoccupied babies took no notice of me, and I went to admire them closer before I remembered Katie's advice, and went on. The floor of the deep forest was blanketed in mushrooms, some bigger than the palm of my hand, their pungent aroma filling my nostrils with an acute sense of depth and insight. I could not resist but kneel down and sample one of the fine-tasting fungi, and located the largest I could find. I knelt down and grasped the tough stalk, all the while the memory of Katie fading into oblivion. Up jumped a large, and overly inflated bullfrog onto the mushroom, a very curious sight to say the least. And it became even more curious as the frog seemed to draw the bulk of the mushroom's weight into its venom gland, growing larger and larger as its seat shrunk to a pebble of dust. If only I could have realized how dangerous my mouth-opening awe of the situation would become. The bullfrog stretched its jaws, shooting its venom straight down my open trap, and too late, I had already consumed a large quantity of the frog's venom before it was too late. I sprang up in horror, knowing I'd been poisoned by the foul creature, and needed help quick. My mind flashed Lucy, she lived within this forest, and she must surely know what to do with me. So I pelted on down the track, swerving left and right, all the while my vision shifting and my balance wavering. I'd fallen over log and stone, clawing my way past vines and fallen trees, desperate to reach Lucy in time. If I did not reach her soon, then Chris would destroy the both worlds, and I would be responsible. I would be responsible for destroying all of life on this world. It would be my fault, and this is my first time here. If I do not make for the clearing soon, I shall die. And then what will become of this land after that? I stumbled into the open space, but was this the right space? Had I made a wrong turn back there and doubled back to the sea again? Am I lost within the forest, with no way out? Will I ever reach Lucy before the end comes? What have I done? I collapsed in a nervous wreck at the entrance to the clearing, and sat shivering at my animosity towards the creatures of this land. My logical thought processes had broken down, and every thought I had was of the evil consequences of my life. It was many hours before I woke up out of that recurring trance, to the sound of maniacal whispering in the bushes to my left. I could not make out any shapes beyond the first line of trees, but I quickly darted towards the mound in the center of the clearing for cover. Had I not been asleep at the entrance for many hours, I might have been able to plan for the events about to unfold before my eyes. As I rounded the mound, the fair Princess Lucy, the Major Gentleman Chairman MAOI and the crafty leader Dimitri all came into view among many seats behind the cover of the mound. They all sat in dismay at the sighting of me. They immediately beckoned me closer, and Lucy opened her mouth to speak. Before she could though, her head rolled off her neck, and her skull was crushed by a large steel-capped boot. Lucy's brain oozed with the runny liquid, spilling out across the ground, as I lay in shock and fear of the man standing on my savior's head. Ah! The White Eye has come to the Lords of Triptomania for help, and ends up being murdered by the well-serving Cain. Aaron, show yourself to the boy so he knows who his killer is. From behind the dark and muscly Cain waddled Aaron, a sloth-like woman with an evil grin, and an immensely huge body. She had tied behind her the dead bodies of Chairman MAOI and Dimitri, twisted and deformed into their binding ropes. Well. It seems Katie isn't here to save you now, is she? The unmistakable hiss of Chris sounded behind him, and he fast approached the mound, knife glinting in the sun, gripped extremely hard. The three evils began to take turns in telling myself of my impending doom. As much as we hate to say this, but your arrival here last night has proved both good and bad for us. You have tempted myself to finally do what I have longed to do, murder my brother. Never again shall I be looked down upon in the nightclub scene again. You have organized for that annoying Ms. Kelly to be disposed of, as well as Torsten's incessant beating to be finally ended. Both Chairman MAOI and Dimitri have met their ends, and not at all too late. Their jobs were far too serious to be rewarding, and their properness needed punishing. As for Lucy, she forms the final part of the equation needed to hand possession of the land to the four evil superpowers, for Jack Daniels will be along shortly. And you shall meet him in person, individual. Ah, could this be him now? But it was not. I could not be mistaken as to the sound of that whoosing scorching the treetops, and in from the roof of the clearing came Katie, and Sally in her arms. They landed with a running thud, and ran towards their nearest opponent. I leaned back as Sally's instantaneous administration came into force, quickly overpowering Erin's slow swipes, and choking her to death on a vine ripped from the mound nearby. Katie stood up to Kane, both sending power balls and plasma bolts at each other from near and far. Many times the wakes of these energy waves sailed by my ears, but Sally caught Kane's feet in her vine, and he was easily picked off. Katie and Sally spun round to see how I was getting along, and I realized why they were looking at me like that. I rolled just in time over Lucy's body for Chris's blow to strike the wet soil, Lucy's brain matter flying straight through Chris's lack of existence. Further and further he pushed me, until I was backed in a corner against a tree on the mound, and he was preparing to lunge at my throat. "Perform the candy flip. Focus. Perform the candy flip," yelled Katie, as Chris charged at me, with blade pointed. "Here goes," I thought. I sprung into the air, almost as if Katie had propelled me away from Chris's attack. I fumbled inside my pocket, withdrew the chunk of crystal, and landed poised behind Lucy's limp body. A loud squelch happened beneath my hand, and it began to glow. The chunk of crystal in my hand was saturated with the brain fluid of Lucy, and was quickly heating up and flashing bright white. It was beginning to blind me, and I almost did not notice Chris running straight at me. I suddenly realized why they call it the candy flip. The bittersweet substance dissolved in my mouth, just as Chris bore his blade down on me, with no effect whatsoever. I shielded my body, but Chris was far worse off. His shadow of a body faded away, his contact with such a pure goodness as a candy flip destroyed all signs of his evil soul. Katie looked very reminiscent, but also gave me a false hopeful smile that gave me the chills. Sally looked sad, her altar lord Dimitri having been murdered due to her tidings with Jack Daniels. "I was unable to locate Chris, Kane or Erin in either land when I arrived," said Sally, "but I knew where Jack Daniel would be. His location was most certainly on the Sea of Lost Spirits, and so Dimitri and I headed there. We set sail and fought the drunken man, and he was no match for our speed or agility. I sailed him forward to this forest, and returned back to Phenethia Minia to see how the white eye was holding up. I heard on the way here from Katie of the Molotov cocktails, surely they were retaliation for my killing of their leader. I must have got back to shore just as you two had left. If I had gone over with you, maybe these three may have survived." My name, the White Eye, or the individual, was due to my lack of pupil size, something which was strangely common in those parts. I, too, eventually lost my white eye in that land, which I attribute to those strange pills in Phenethia Minia, the toad venom in Tryptominia, and the precious candy flip. But how did I know how to perform the candy flip? I asked Katie, wondering how I managed to execute the maneuver, and think to consume the powerful combination. "You must realize that these lands are not of physical dimensions, but a world made up of your mind, only accessible by combining the two superpowers. Everything you have seen is but a hidden extension of you, and you already know of all that is in it. It is not luck that led you to perform the candy flip, you knew how to do it all along, and only needed to imagine doing it to perform it. But now, you must return to your world, for the land is quickly fading, and your time has come. Sally and I shall now send you home." Sally picked a nearby bush, while Katie constructed a crude pipe of her metallic piping and her jetpack. I laid back against the mound, puffing on the glowing resins of the flowers picked, thinking there's nothing like a good cone, there's nothing like a good cone, there's nothing like a good cone.